Dubbed Hilda the Scarlet O'Hara of Ebbets Field. But there was one movie star Hilda did not particularly like, and that was Lorraine Dade, who just happened to be married to Hilda's absolute favorite Dodger, Leo DeRocher. Leo could do no wrong in Hilda.
Good for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old.
Writing about the work of the Navy Field grounds crew for Rolling Stone in 2014, Dan Epstein commented, quote, "Their efforts testify to the deep emotional connection that so many Detroiters still feel to this spot. It's hard to imagine the sleek and corporate Comerica Park ever engendering a similar degree of protection. And by clearing away the weeds, the garbage, and the rubble, the NFGC has enabled the ghosts and vibrations of the now vanished ballpark to return," end quote. In recent months, the Detroit Police Athletic League has taken over the site, and while there has been some controversy,
Terry was talking about my wintertime session. When I was 24 years old, I used to hang out at a little bar on Grand River Avenue in Detroit, and they had an old jukebox with a happy birthday song on it, and the owner of the bar, an older lady named Ethel Thompson, just hated the song, so I played it all the time just to annoy her. And she always say, "Well, whose day of birthday is it now?" And so I started bringing in photographs of old-time ball players on their birthdays, and I played a birthday song, and then I'd take out the framed photo and set it on the bar, and the people at the bar got a kick out of it, so I just kept it going. About 12 of us there that first year, and we had a blast, and I just kept it going all these years. And eventually, David's family heard about it, and they started showing up. And so that kind of ties in with this weekend, because Babe Ruth's family invited Sarah and I, yesterday we were in New Hampshire to celebrate the 100th birthday of Babe Ruth's daughter, Julia Ruth Stevens. She turned 100 yesterday, so that's where we were yesterday. So we just flew from Boston this morning, and now we're here, and so like we're a couple of jet setters or something. But it's been a crazy weekend. But to be invited to that party, and then to hear, to be honored with the Hilda Award, it's just been a crazy weekend, and we're just thrilled to be here. So I knew I was familiar with Hilda Chester. I know she was a big Dodger fan, and she'd go in the park and ring her bell and bring her signs. And I think it's so cool what the baseball reliquary has done. And I'm just proud that they recognize the efforts of our grounds crew, and I'm just pleased to be here and to be here. Arnold Hano, and at the same time, the reliquary is honoring Don Newcomb and Bo Jackson. It's just a thrill to be here. So Sarah and I are just so thrilled to be here. But as far as the Nathan Field grounds crew, it may have never happened without Tiger broadcaster, Hall of Famer Ernie Harwell. He passed away in early May of 2010. And like many fans, I went to Comerica Park to pay my respects to Ernie. And then I came home later that day, and I caught a little story on the news about how some fans didn't want to go to Comerica Park to remember him. Their way to remember him was to go onto the old field at Michigan and Trumbull and play catch. And so that really touched my heart. I thought that was a great story, and I thought, I didn't know that you could get out there. I didn't know that the field was open. So I went down few days later, on Mother's Day of 2010, with Sarah and some of our friends. And we just went down there just to be able to take some swings, to play catch, play on the same field that so many of the greatest players ever have played on, over 200 Hall of Famers, played on that field. It's just a thrill to be there. But once we started playing, I wasn't that excited because I saw the condition of the field, how tall the grass was, the weeds everywhere. You could barely make out the dirt infield where it was. There's so many weeds. The pitcher's mound, everything, baselines, nothing but weeds, garbage everywhere. So I figured, well, I got a riding mower, and I could cut the grass. So I figured I'd go home and call my friends and see if anyone was interested. So I did. I went home, called my friends, and we came back a few days later, and we had our first cleanup at the ball field. It was the 12th of May, 2010, and the city wasn't happy that they were there. An official from the city came out and told us we weren't welcome there, but we weren't leaving. We stayed. We continued to work. A few minutes later, the police showed up, but they left us alone. They left. So that was our first day at the field, and so we continued to come back every week. And the city continued to threaten us with arrest, so we kept coming back. And eventually, it took a while. They finally left us alone, and we were just happy. We knew the city didn't have the resources to maintain the park, and we did it because we felt it was the right thing to do. And when I was out there, I remember the first time I was out on my riding mower, out there in left field, and I thought, wow, this is where I used to sit in the left field grandstands, and there'd be number 23 right in front of me, Willie Horton, out there in left field. And I thought about the history going back even decades earlier. I'm thinking that's the same spot where the Tiger fans pelted Joe Beck with garbage in the 1934 World Series after he slid hard into Tiger third baseman Marv Owen. So all that history, it's just, it lives on there. And, and I cut the grass in center field and think, wow, Tris Speaker played here. And I go in right field, Babe Ruth played here, and L.K. Line. It's just, there's just so much history there on that field. And and what happened was the people then in that neighborhood, it became their park. Obviously, we were concerned with preserving the historic dimensions of the field, but we also wanted to be a park that everyone could enjoy. And that's what we had for 6 years. We had an open park, accessible to everyone. Even if people didn't want to play baseball, they had picnics, they had parties, they could walk their dogs, fly a kite. And actually, we were happy people walk their dogs, because we had a problem there with the Canadian geese pooping all over the field. It got to be terrible. We tried all kinds of things to get rid of them, and I was even putting up these fake owls in the outfield, hoping it would scare them away, and that did not work. But the dogs did, and it was great. So people had a place where they could run with their dogs, and we turned that field. We really did a great job. We're not professional groundskeepers. We didn't have a sponsor. We paid for everything ourselves. And one time we had a groundskeeper from Comerica Park come out and tell us that our dirt infield was professional. And we did a great job. We had no watering system. We just relied on Mother Nature. And the field really looked good. And we were hosting Little League games, adult fast pitch games, vintage baseball, the way it was played in the 1860s. We had many games over the last several years there at Michigan and Trumbull. So, it's been a grass, it was a grass baseball field from 1896 up until about 10 days ago. But, because before, the configurations now are the Navin Field configurations. The park opened the same day as Fenway Park in Boston on the 20th of April, 1912. So the dimensions were the same, the history is all still there, and we did everything we could to preserve it. And before that, it was Bennett Park. It was a wooden structure, and home plate was actually at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull. So that's why I'm here to say Michigan and Trumbull, because many years ago, home plate was there. But since 1912, the configuration was the same, and that site just means so much to so many people. And on dozens of occasions, we've witnessed people scattering the ashes of their loved ones there. And that's just when we're down there. So I have no doubt in the last 5 years, 6 years, that probably 200 people or more have had their ashes scattered. So the site means that much to so many people, and at least 5 couples have been married there, including Sarah and I 2 years ago. So to many people it's sacred ground, but we just enjoyed it so much, and we've had several former Tigers come out to visit the field. We've had like 1968 world champions, Denny McClain come out, and Mickey Lolich. And Mickey Lolich came out, and he came out to watch his grandson playing a Little League game. And he had a great time, and so a couple of the 1984 Tigers have also come out, Lou Whitaker and Dave Rosema, and another former Tiger who was just all around good utility man. He could play just about every position. His name is John Walkenfuss, and he's not a famous Tiger, but I don't think I ever saw a better hit and run man than John Walkenfuss. I mean, every time he just delivered a base hit into right field, and he's a right-handed hitter, and he could catch, he could play first base, outfield, third base, and but he became a huge supporter of ours. He actually drove up from Delaware a couple of years ago just to play baseball with us on that field, to play ball with us and his fans. So we've gotten a lot of support from former Tigers. Not so much from the city, but that changed this year. They did recognize us, as Terry mentioned. He was a Spirit of Detroit Award, so eventually they recognized our efforts. But we were very disappointed to hear that. We're not anti-development, we're not anti-PAL, the Police Athletic League, who got control of the site, but we really did think the historic park like this, the grass should have been preserved. And not only that, we had a 9-acre green space in the heart of the historic Corktown, and the people in the neighborhood really loved being able to go out there. That's all going to change now. The access is going to be gone, and but we think it's great that kids will continue to play baseball there. So, but as far as our grounds crew, we're going to move on to new projects. We weren't just passionate about Michigan and Trumbull and baseball, and we're passionate about improving the city, and we love Detroit. And some of our grounds crew members live in Detroit, and some don't, but Detroit lives in all of us, and we're going to continue on. We've already cut the grass at Clark Park this last week in southwest Detroit, and we're going to be cleaning up and fixing up other baseball diamonds as well. Many people have said you should move on to maybe try Hamtramck Stadium. That's an old Negro League park, and it's one of only a few left in the nation that's still standing. And that one needs a lot of work, and that may be a future project for us. And that's what I'm wearing, my Detroit Stars jersey here, like the great Turkey Stearns wore back in the 20s and that. So that could be our next project. I'm not sure. And actually, I wore this jersey when I got married to Sarah at home plate, so 2 years ago. So. Yeah, but it's been the people I've met from that grounds crew are the greatest people. These volunteers are amazing. Some of them drive hours each way just to come to that field every weekend, year after year, driving hundreds of miles to pick up garbage, to rake the infield, to pull weeds. And it's just the most dedicated group. And while it's sad that they tore out the field, these people that I've met over the last 6 years mean so much more to me than the park ever did. And I'm just honored to have made so many friends over the last 6 years. And we're going to move on, and we're going to continue to do what we can to work on improving the city and to do what we can to fix the ballparks in Detroit. And I'm honored to be here today to receive the Hilda Award. And thank you.
First, I just want to thank the baseball reliquiary for letting me meet you in the honor to Tony Sumner. It's an amazing thing to get, and I am a little nervous now, so I'm trying to calm down. But I'll treat it like we're interviewing our subjects. So one of the best things about the project is it does just do that. It creates bridges over gaps between generations. The way that baseball is looked at by some of the younger generation and the older generation is that it's something that maybe their parents did or their uncle did, and there's this missing space that tells the history of African Americans in the game. And I'll also say, to make sure to acknowledge African Americans and other minority players in the game as well. Because during that time when they were playing, if you weren't white, you were looked at as black. And that's for the Dominican players, the Cuban players, and having the ability to tell the stories of all those players and their lives together, what it was like on the road, how baseball has changed, and be able to present a little bit of the story of how baseball actually changed the fabric of this country. Before, at the time that they started, they played during the civil rights movements, they played before those times occurred. Just stories of them being on the bus and being told that, well, we don't serve niggers here. And that was for one of the Dominican players. And he went in there saying, like, wait a minute, I don't understand. I thought I wasn't the same. So having those stories between Dominican players, the Cuban players, the African American players, and realizing that at that point in time in history, we're all united, that's something that I look forward to sharing with everyone, because there are a lot of things that are going on in America right now. And something just as simple and as fun as baseball was used to.
I'd like to thank the baseball reliquary and Terry Cannon for extending an invitation to speak to you. It's a little better. I'd also like to commend this year's inductees to the Shrine of Eternals, Arthur Hano, Bo Jackson, and Don Newcomb. None of us would really be here without what you guys have done and what you've done for baseball and for the wider culture of our country. So I'd like to commend you. Finally, offer my congratulations to Tom Derry and Naftali Williams, winners of the 2016 Hilda Award and the Tony Sala Memorial Award, respectively. It's a tribute to your accomplishments that even out in flyover country where I now live, I'd heard of your efforts and had met people who knew of your efforts. And you're truly an inspiration to me, and your accomplishments are amazing, so thank you. One other thing I'm adding off the cuff, I love the performance by Jay earlier, and in particular I love the fact that he's saying, I don't know if they do this, a stock boy or a store clerk or something. The plan was for him to wait and get established, and as his own siblings moved to New York themselves, and they could all reconnect. My grandfather worked hard. He saved what money he could, and he waited for the grim memories of his childhood to fade. Now, I'm not looking for sympathy on behalf of Tom Fallon. You should know that when I knew him in later years, he was the most loving, caring, curious, interested person that you would ever meet, and was widely beloved by everybody in the family. Rather, I mentioned his tough childhood to posit the idea that my grandfather, lost and living in Brooklyn at age 18, was right to fall into the geography of baseball. And so that's exactly what he did. In 1938, my grandfather became a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. And now, this was an odd and unlikely choice for several reasons. First of all, Tom Fallon was not a Brooklyn native, so he really didn't have any associations with the place or the people. Additionally, the Dodgers in those years were not only the perennial doormat of the National League, but they were also something of a joke. They were known for bumbling in very epic ways. Their management was known for its profligacy, and they were even known, the players were known for being sort of addicted to gambling. But my grandfather fell into their orbit nonetheless, mostly and curiously because of one player. My favorite player is a bit notorious today, he told me in the 1970s, probably after I had explained to him the virtues of my own baseball hero, Steve Garvey. He was a natural leader. You could see that even then. And a great shortstop. He had great hands. You could get to almost any ball hit to him. He paused just long enough for me to ask, who is it? It was Leo DeRocher, he said. Now, as it happens, this was a really impressively prescient choice of favorite baseball player. In 1938, DeRocher was a new and reluctant Brooklynite. Having just come from the world champion Cardinals, and earlier having played with the Yankees of Ruth and Garrett and Lazzeri and all the rest, DeRocher said he had dropped through a trapdoor onto a team that would finish 7th place in the National League that year. My grandfather, though, saw something in the aging shortstop who played well enough in the first half of that season to be named to the league's All-Star team. In 1939, DeRocher began to change his mind about Brooklyn and the Dodgers after he was named player manager and led them to an 84-69 third place finish. And by 1941, DeRocher's Dodgers appeared in their first World Series in 21 years. For my grandfather, DeRocher and the Dodgers came at just the right time. They became his baseball nation as he recovered from life in the orphanage, met his future wife, and then moved to Albany, New York, became a shopkeeper who supported his alcoholic father during stints of brief sobriety, joined the Albany Police Department, and then eventually and inexplicably to the rest of his siblings, grew restless and moved his family to the land of milk and golden honey, Southern California in the 1950s.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Terry. And Terry, I'd like to, before I talk about Don, I'd like to thank you for an added bonus that I wasn't expecting today, because I was looking ahead, and all of a sudden I heard Terry say the phrase, "and the most anticipated speech of the day," and I was kind of flustered. I mean, I've known Terry for a long time, and I really didn't expect that. And then I looked at the program and realized it wasn't yet my turn. But it is a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to represent Don Newcomb, and one of the gentlemen before I came complimented me on a suit and tie on a hot day. And if anybody knows Don Newcomb, if you're going to pinch hit for Don Newcomb, I did not want it, getting back to Don, that his representative here was in an open collar and anything other than dressed up, because he's just an amazing person, but also the best dressed person whenever he's at the ballpark. Let's go back to 1946, because that's where this starts. And 3 African-American ball players report to the Brooklyn Dodgers to really play baseball, but they also made history just by showing up. And if you think about them in the context, 2 of them are now represented on United States postage stamps: Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella. Now, Jackie passed away in 1972 at age 53. Roy Campanella passed away in 1993 at age 71. And now it's the year 2016, and Don is 90 years old, and Don is the one left to tell all the stories from way back then. And so as the Dodgers team historian, it's one thing to read something in a book, it's something to know the records and stuff that you read, but you really have to go to the primary sources, especially if you were brutal in Little League, and if you can't even make it in Little League, how are you going to judge these great players once they get to the ultimate level? And so Don, over the years, has always been a great source of stories and inspiration. And in 2005, it was the 50th anniversary of the 1955 Brooklyn Dodgers. And the Dodgers were going to invite the 13 surviving members back to Dodger Stadium. There was going to be a special reunion in Vero Beach. And we also, because of the documentary, the same thing that you're doing in terms of wanting to have that oral history, we wanted to sit down with the former players and just let the camera roll and tell the stories. And so with Don, we talk about 1955, and you know, first off, you maybe talk about early in his career, the Rookie of the Year in 1949, and being a National League All-Star just 6 weeks into his career. You may talk about the years 1952, 1953, when in the prime of his career, he actually went into the military. And so as the Dodgers are winning back-to-back pennants, Nuka's in the Army. Nuka's serving his country. And so you see the lifetime statistics and wonder what might have happened with those 2 extra years. And then you look at 1954, Walter Alston takes over, and then 1955, it all comes together. They win 10 in a row to start the season, 22-2. In the World Series, they get off to a tough start, but then they come back. And it gets to be Game 7, and he tells the story so proudly. Johnny Padres, just give me 1 run. He says that on the bus going to Yankee Stadium, October the 4th, and along with a great catch by Sandy Amoros in left field, put it all together, and there's a 2-0 Dodger victory, the first and only championship. So when you talk about all those things, there's so much excitement. Don would talk about in the clubhouse in 1955, a famous picture with Duke Snyder, where they're both trying on each other's hats and they're pouring beer in each other's hats. And actually Don had gotten mad when they had clinched the pennant because they were really pouring it on, and he was getting some of the really good clothes that he had stashed away wet. And so even though they were going to the World Series, it was like, hey, this is the good stuff. Don't mess with these clothes. So then they were having a laugh about it a week later when they finally beat the Yankees. But this is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the stadium, and the tape kept rolling. And so Don's all dressed up. What else would you like to talk about? Well, we kept going and kept going and kept going. But sometimes the tone changed, and Don kept going, and finally there were some other subjects that Don talked about, freely volunteered, and so, okay, let's talk about what it was really like in 1946, about being in the minor leagues as far as the integration and having to start off at the low minors because some of the other minor league affiliates were not going to take African-American players. In fact, presidents of the league said, we'd rather not play than have integration. Then you keep going forward as far as what it was like in the clubhouse, what it was like in the locker room. And he was talking, finally he gets to be about 1954, and he's come back from the Army, and he's telling the story that he is just, he's looking around, and yes, Jackie made his debut, but this is 7 years after his debut, and there's been plenty of African-American ball players in the major leagues, and yet why, when you go to St. Louis, does the bus pull up and a certain number of players have to get off the bus and take cabs to a different part of town, while the other players just go to the team hotel, even though it's not really a team hotel if they're not all there. So finally that really got to him, and he, along with Jackie Robinson, said, you know what, this is ridiculous. Let's go back to that hotel and let's just talk to the manager. This just isn't right. I was in the Army and everything like that. And he tells the story of talking to the manager. The manager says he really doesn't have an answer, and he says, well, we don't want you using the pool. Well, Jackie says, that's fine, I don't swim, and Newcomb says, I don't swim during the season, so that problem is solved. But then the cameras keep rolling, and Don thinks about it, and he was thinking about all those times in between, 1947, 48, they're winning the pennant, they're very famous, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, and he finally settles in on a hot day in St. Louis. And suddenly this is all coming back to him. The Dodgers have played a game and they go home that night and they each go to the separate hotels, and Don has this picture of laying on a bed, and what he said they had to do was they took the sheet and they went to the sink and they wet it, and then they opened up all the windows because there was no air conditioning. And he's thinking about sitting on this bed. He's a major league player, he's with the Dodgers, he's supposedly a great star, everybody wants his autograph at the ballpark, but at the end of the day, he's got to sit on this bed hoping for a breeze to try to cool off. And he says, why? Couldn't somebody have said anything? And then he looks at the person interviewing him, who's me, and then it's a direct question. He said, couldn't anybody have done anything? And so suddenly, it's not a quote. This in the middle of this dialogue, it's a conversation. Sometimes you're not expecting to hear these stories, and sometimes there are no answers. You may know all the stats, you may know all the pennant-winning years, and suddenly you're there and you don't have an answer for that. And later, part of that 1955 reunion, Don wasn't able to attend Vero Beach, but along with that was another poignant moment, because Clem O'Brien, the former relief pitcher, was at breakfast. He was trying to explain to his family sort of the same thing about Jackie Robinson. But why this, why that? And he said, that's just the way it was back then. And then all of a sudden he got very, very quiet, and he had a tear in his eye. And he looked down, and he said, I should have done more. I'm embarrassed. And right there, unprompted, he's at the breakfast table, he just starts to cry to himself. And he wasn't expecting it. It was just something, just like Don, thinking about that moment in the hotel room. Why? Why did this have to happen? And so I think that's very important. And for an organization like the Reliquiary, I think not only Don accepting the award and being happy to be recognized, the Reliquiary is really an opportunity to hear these other stories. Not to hear the stats, not to hear the pennants and anything like that. It's all the things that happen in between. The stories about Glenn Burke, Charlie Finley, Bill Veck, and who's ever got that wooden leg, running around. But that's the wonderful part about, Terry, what you do with the reliquary. Because in the beginning, Don wasn't quite sure what the reliquary was. His wife was giving it to him, he says, it's where they put relics. To which Don said, thank you, dear. But when he found out more about the organization, he was really touched. And on behalf of Don, thank you for the award. Congratulations to all the other recipients. And thank you not only for this honor, but for hearing the Don Newcomb story. Thank you very much.
I put my glasses on so I can see what I wrote. It's a great honor to be here, Terry. I'd like to thank you and the reliquary for inviting me. Congratulations to all the other award winners. And it's a special honor, really, to be on the same program with Arnold Hano. Growing up in the 1960s, if you were interested in sports, you had to read Sport magazine. It was the Sports Illustrated of its time, and Arnold's stories always inspired me and showed me the possibilities of what writing could accomplish. So it's an honor to you, Arnold, and I'm happy to be on the same program with you. Some athletes are so elite that a one-word introduction is all that is required. Ali, Kobe, Babe, Kareem, Shaq, Pele, Wilt. As soon as I mention those names, I'm sure in your mind's eye you can see a towering home run, a backboard rattling dunk, a dramatic knockout. Now I'm going to utter two words, and for anybody in this room who is 30-something or older, they will trigger not one image, not one sport, but a highlight reel across the athletic spectrum. The words are, Bo knows. There was Vincent Edward Bo Jackson literally running up an outfield wall after making a catch, barreling his way through the Seattle Seahawks defense and down the sidelines on his way to the goal line, the end zone, and the tunnel leading to the locker room without so much as a pause. A 91-yard run for the ages on Monday Night Football. There was Bo dressed for tennis, hoops, cycling, soccer, hockey, horse racing, auto racing, surfing, golf, and cricket. Bo Jackson was certainly not the first to suit up in more than one sport at the professional level. In the first half of the 20th century, Jim Thorpe played both Major League Baseball and pro football, and was an Olympic gold-winning track and field star. Dave DeBusschere played in both the NBA and MLB. He was a forward for the Detroit Pistons and the New York Knicks, and a pitcher for the Chicago White Sox. And there was Deion Sanders, who played Major League Baseball as an outfielder for 4 different teams over 9 seasons, and in the NFL, where he played primarily at cornerback and on special teams for 5 clubs over 14 seasons. But Deion couldn't match the brilliance of Bo, the shooting star who blazed across the sports landscape in spectacular fashion, but like all shooting stars, was extinguished all too quickly. A devastating hip injury ending his NFL career at age 28. Still, his spirit couldn't be broken. It was assumed his baseball career was also over after he was forced to undergo hip replacement surgery. But Bo, showing a level of resolve to match his talent level, came back to play 2 more years with an artificial hip. Though he won the Heisman Trophy in 1985, playing for Auburn, Bo's professional accomplishments were modest by normal standards. No World Series, no Super Bowl appearances. He never rushed for 1,000 yards nor scored more than 6 touchdowns in any of his 4 years with the Raiders. But because of the baseball season, he never played more than 11 games in an NFL season. In his 8 years in the big leagues, 5 with the Royals, 2 with the White Sox, and 1 with the Angels, Bo never hit more than 32 home runs, or batted higher than 279. Only once did he drive in more than 100 runs. But again, he never played more than 135 games in a season. Now, I remember a conversation I had with my son Alan, who's in the audience here. when he was 8, 9 years old, and always had his head in one of the media guides stacked on my desk. Who was the greatest baseball player you ever saw, my son once asked me. Willie Mays, I said, without hesitation. But he doesn't have any records, my son said, being a kid. Other guys had more hits, more home runs, a higher batting average. Willie Mays wasn't about numbers, I told him, though Mays certainly had monumental, if not record totals in all the major categories. You had to see Willie Mays play to understand what he was. There was no way I could explain it to you. So it was with Bo. Whatever he accomplished, whether on the diamond or the gridiron, he did with a combination of flair, explosiveness, and timing that enabled him to command the stage, whatever stage he was on, and leave fans with images that are still vivid a quarter century later. For example, Bo played in only one All-Star game, the 1989 Midsummer Classic at Anaheim Stadium. But leading off the bottom of the first, he smashed a towering 450-foot home run over the center field wall. Vince Scully describing the blast on the telecast by saying he almost hit it out of the state. And Bo went on to be named the game's MVP. Rick Sutcliffe, a member of the National League team in that game, said afterward of Bo's blow, "I will never, ever forget the sound of that baseball. That home run," said Sutcliffe, "was one of the many things that Bo Jackson blessed the game of baseball with." In 1990, Bo hit 3 home runs and 3 at-bats in a game at Yankee Stadium. He never got a shot at number 4 because he had to leave the game after dislocating his shoulder, diving for a ball hit by Deion Sanders. Bo missed 39 days, but in his first game back, in his first at-bat, he hit a 435-foot home run off Randy Johnson, who was then with the Seattle Mariners. Said Bo, "I still made that 4 consecutive home run play." Bo was getting over another shoulder injury when he caught a fly ball near the outfield wall in Baltimore's old Memorial Stadium one day in 1990. He was moving too fast to stop, but Bo was nevertheless determined to protect his tender shoulder from the wall looming ahead. So what did he do? Without breaking stride, he ran right up that wall, nearly to the top, and then back down again. That seemed easier to me and logical, said Bo. Maybe logical for Spider-Man, but not normal outfielders. Then there was the throw, capital T. It came in 1989, a 300 feet in the air throw by Bo to nail Harold Reynolds, running from first base, at the plate. "You need to pee in a cup," joked Reynolds. God gave me a built-in steroid," said Bo. Baseball and football are very different games, Bo once explained. In a way, both of them are easy. Football is easy if you're crazy as hell. Baseball is easy if you've got patience. They'd both be a little easier for me if I were a little more crazy and a little more patient. His ability to succeed in various athletic activities was amazing. "I taught myself how to pole vault in one day," he once said. "The next day, I entered a meet to pole vault and won it all for the state of Alabama." It was this phenomenal ability to excel at any sport he tried that inspired Nike to create the commercials that caused Bo's legend to grow even larger. Who could forget Bo knows tennis, Bo knows golf, Bo knows hockey, and on and on. But perhaps the biggest thing Bo knew was the importance of humility and acceptance. When he retired from baseball at the age of 31, he said, "God has his way of opening up our eyes to see reality. The way he opened my eyes is to allow me to have this hip injury. This is a rough way to go, but I had to accept the fact." He went on to get his college degree, as he had promised his mother before she died, went into business, worked with kids, and never complained. In an age when athletes often bemoan the cruel twists of fate that derail promising careers, here is a guy who had plenty to bemoan. A seemingly simple tackle in a Raider playoff game brought down one of the most powerful players to ever put on a uniform. He might have had another decade as a double superstar. Instead, he picked himself up quietly and moved on to enjoy the rest of his days. "Don't run too fast through life," he once said. "You only have one." Bo Jackson may be worthy of induction into a baseball or a football Hall of Fame, but he's also, based on his attitude and outlook and example, a Hall of Famer in the game of life.
Shut down at 4? No, 5. Oh, no worries, we're not going to go to 5. 90 years ago, this very season, a young mother taught her 4-year-old son how to safely cross Edgemont Avenue in Upper Manhattan. Mind you, this was not considered child neglect in those days, for many young children had the run of New York City. The child's object in crossing Edgemont Avenue was to arrive at a popular venue just across the street, known as the Polo Grounds, where he would meet his grandfather, who would give him his pass to a seat above first base in the grandstand. The pass was one of the perks enjoyed by his grandfather, who was a lieutenant in the New York Police Department, and his grandson understood the highest ranking Jew in the police force in those days. And so it was that this boy would watch the New York Giants play baseball. In training her son to safely cross Edgemont Avenue, this mother unleashed upon the baseball universe an extraordinary fan and a writer of great talent. For that boy was, of course, Arnold Hano. His grandson stand seats, and he moved his preferred location to that area of the ballpark unto this day. He was soon able to finance his own independent excursions to the Polo Grounds by collecting pop bottles, which he stashed in the knickers that young boys wore in those days, and then redeeming the bottles for enough cash for a ticket to the bleachers, 50 cents. Arnold was enchanted by Bill Terry, the Giants' star first baseman. I am left-handed, and Bill Terry was left-handed, he explains, and he was my first hero. And so began his study of the athletes who played the game he fell in love with. With 3 teams in the city, New York in the late 1920s was a thrilling place for young baseball fans. The Giants were in their glory years under their manager, John J. McGraw. Down in Brooklyn, the Dodgers were becoming the Giants' perennial nemesis, and nearby in the Bronx, the New York Yankees were beginning their ascendancy, led by Babe Ruth. Ensconced in the bleachers, Arnold soaked up baseball's rhythms, fundamentals, and stories, developing firm opinions on the game and its players. The greatest of them all, he claims, was Babe Ruth, because his talents went far beyond his famed home runs. He points out that Ruth broke fast, had an accurate arm, and always threw to the right base. And he stole 17 bases a season twice. Arnold was there when Ruth pitched for the New York Yankees on the last day of the 1933 season. Of Ruth's performance that afternoon, he says, quote, "He was cutting, he had finesse, he picked up the outside corner with his curveball. He went the whole 9 innings, and the Yankees won 7-5, end quote." The guy can remember. Ruth's streak of 29 2/3 scoreless innings pitched in the World Series lasted until 1961. Hano goes on. So Ruth was a great pitcher, not just a good pitcher. One of the great pleasures of being a kid about Manhattan in those days was chance encounters with one of baseball's heroes. Just after Ruth had pitched that last game in 1933, Arnold spotted the great man on the street, walking with his wife and daughter. "Hey, babe," Hano piped up, "how come you didn't strike anybody out the other day?" He recalls that Ruth laughed and said, "Oh, I wanted those palookas behind me to earn their keep." If New York City was rich in baseball, it was rich in stories too. And Arnold's writing career started early. He was 7 or 8 when his elder brother Alfie recruited him to help with his self-published Montgomery Avenue News, which the boys sold door to door. Their primary source was the lurid accounts in the city's tabloids about the latest local gang assassination, which sometimes happened as a mob boss lingered as his favorite restaurant. To this day, Hano prefers a seat in any restaurant that faces the door with his back to the wall, a habit he shares with other New Yorkers. He continued writing as a student at Long Island University, working for the school newspaper as sports editor and co-editor. After graduating with a degree in English and journalism in 1941, he enlisted. I'm sorry, he didn't enlist yet. He worked for the New York Daily News until his enlistment in the Army. During World War II, both he and Alfie served with valor. Arnold, who attained the rank of second lieutenant, was awarded the bronze arrowhead. And that means that he was in the first wave of people to go on shore of a particular particular zone of fighting. Alfie, however, did not make it through. His B-17 was hit by an enemy fire over Germany. After helping several enlisted men to safety, he went down with his plane. When the war ended, Arnold jumped into New York's literary milieu, teaching, editing, and publishing the fiction he wrote in his spare time. In 1951, he got lucky when he married Bonnie Abraham. The couple worked at the magazine management company. He is editor-in-chief of Lion Books. She is production manager for the young Stan Lee, who went on to Spider-Man comic fame. They were also politically active, going up to Harlem to help register black voters in the late 1940s. And one of the Shrine's other inductee, one of the other inductees, Lester Grodney, did light in that. Heading west. In 1955, Bonnie and Arnold put their 18-month-old daughter, Laurel, and their beagle puppy into the back seat of their brand new Ford sedan and set out to find a new place to live. Bonnie had found New York City a difficult place to raise a child, and Arnold, who had left Lion Books to write full-time, figured he could live and work anywhere. En route on California Highway 1 to visit friends in San Diego, they passed through what Arnold calls, quote, a darling little town, an absolute charming town with some sophistication, end quote. To Bonnie, it felt like home. Inquiries were made. Was Laguna Beach expensive? No, said their friends. Too many starving artists. As a newly launched freelance writer, Arnold figured he'd fit right in. In Laguna, Arnold and Bonnie discovered a community that engaged their interest in the arts, their love for gardens and old homes, and their passion for grassroots politics. Early on, the Hanos discovered that the small African-American community in Laguna was not welcome in the city's 3 barber shops. Arnold quickly negotiated to change to that. In those days, he wrote during the mornings, with afternoons devoted to ocean swims and body surfing, followed by martinis on the beach. The couple purchased the 1927 Hansel and Gretel style house in Bluebird Canyon. The home is on the city's historic register, and they live there still. In 1971, Arnold served as the founding chair of Village Laguna. He was absolutely instrumental in establishing height limits along the beachfront. Bonnie currently serves as the corresponding secretary of the Village Laguna Board of Directors, also dedicated to preserving Laguna's charm. Since 2003, she has served on the Heritage Committee. Both Hanos are still regularly seen at city council meetings, which can go on past midnight. I love the oldest of Laguna, says Arnold, and that we managed to keep it Laguna. Well, much of the reason why Laguna Beach doesn't look like Miami Beach can be attributed to the Hanos' activism. Ask any old long-time resident. Although California proved a good move for the Hanos, Arnold wasn't nearly as happy when the team he grew up with decided to move west. In the same way that people forswear love after a romantic heartbreak, Arnold swore off the Giants when they moved to San Francisco in 1958. It did not last, though. He reconsidered and follows the Giants unto today, and he continues to detest the Dodgers. A Dodger loss, he says, sometimes gives him greater pleasure than a Giant win. In California, Arnold was prolific, publishing baseball articles in such venues as we've heard as Sport Magazine, Western novels, short fiction, and Ellery Queen and Alfred Hitchcock mystery magazines, biographies of heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali, basketball star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Willie Mays. One morning at breakfast in the early 1950s, he and Bonnie heard a radio report. Arnold recalls, quote, Senator Joe McCarthy had sent 2 of his stooges, Roy Kahn and David Schein, over to Europe to investigate U.S. Information Service libraries to see what kind of, quote, communist, end quote, propaganda they were peddling. And they found these, quote, communist, end quote, books by Hemingway and Steinbeck. And the news stories said they had them burned. I went through the rest of the day feeling that something had been torn out of my stomach. Turned out that was not true. The books were not burned, but they were removed, end quote. The story prompted Arnold to write the short story, The Crate at Outpost 1, about the dangers of not reading. For the crate of the title contains the enemy's greatest weapon, books. The story has been republished in more than 20 languages.
Is there nothing left to say? And thank you, Gene, thank you, Terry, and thank you guys for coming and for voting for me. I am the afterthought. We had Don Newcomb and Bo Jackson, and then finally, with 26% of the vote, which means 74% of the people did not vote for me. There I was finally. Anyway, it's lovely, it's charming to be here. The life of a writer cannot be condensed into these few minutes. So let me just talk about a couple of little things that strike my mind. Some of it I picked up during today, and sometimes I just think about it at night when I can't sleep, which is often. The saddest thing that I can think of is I understand there is now a machine. They can place it behind the catcher, and that will call balls and strikes. Right, thank you for that's how I feel also. It isn't that I love umpires. I love and hate umpires, but the umpire is the final arbiter, and to have his decision now determined by somebody in a cave in New York City to determine whether he did touch or did not touch the base is absolutely ludicrous. Besides which it is... Thank you, you quote me. It's also time-consuming. All this talk about let's speed up the games. There have been some funny remarks about speeding up the game. When Vince Scully was asked what made the game so slow, he thought for a moment and he said, batting gloves. and if you remember, I forget his name, but there wasn't that would go.
Garcia Parra.
Whoever it was. After each pitch, he would step out and he'd go through each finger of each glove and then step back in. I think the thing that's making the game so slow is the bullpen. There used to be a pitcher who would go 7, 8 innings, and then somebody would step in and help that 8th inning, and then maybe the 9th inning. But now we have these experts. I watched that Giant game, San Diego game yesterday. Very sad that in the 8th inning, the Giants used Sergio Romo, who had to face Will Meyer, who was hit 20 home runs, and then Kemp, and then Lasardo, anyway, whoever it was. And he struck out the first 2 and got the other guy on the ground ball to first base. He probably used 12 pitchers, 13 pitchers. So why not pitch him in the 9th inning also? They had all that break that ridiculous All-Star game. They had all that breaking time, so he could have pitched another inning. Instead, they brought in that lame guy who can't get anybody out anymore. And not only does he give up 4 hits in a row, then he makes a balk and walks in the winning run for the San Diego team. I'm a Giant fan. Fandom is great fun. Fandom is the glue that keeps all of us together. I remember sitting with my father and my brother and my mother's father, my grandfather. We sat in a row at the Polo Grounds one day, and I sat next to Ike. We called my grandfather Ike. Everybody did. And I said, Ike, tell me about Honus Wagner. My grandfather was of German descent, and his favorite team was Pittsburgh because of Honus Wagner being of German descent. And he said, Honus Wagner had hands large as pillows. And I thought, wow, that does it. I now know how big his hands were, and I know also how soft his hands were. And so I know that Honus Wagner must have been a very great shortstop, just in that one little sentence. So fandom, in my case, was familial. My grandfather, my father, and my brother and I were all fans, and we went and we bled and we died and we cried, and it's the what should be. The Giants have been my team. I don't know why Gene said I lost faith in them when they came out. I came out in ¡55. They followed me. and when the Dodgers went to Chavez Ravine, I also wondered what happened to all those uprooted Mexican-American families there that got kicked out. So it was easy to hate the Dodgers. It's been easy to hate the Dodgers ever since, despite Don Newcomb. And Don Newcomb, the great pitcher that he was, you have to remember that all of our great ball players had moments when they weren't so great. Don started the 51 playoff game where Bobby Thompson hit the home run. He started it. He didn't throw that ball that Ralph Banger threw across. And he started the playoff game in '62 when the Giants beat the Dodgers, when the Dodgers completely collapsed in the ninth inning. And Dick Young wrote his wonderful lead. I'm not good at memorizing things, so this I'm paraphrasing. Dick Young wrote of the Dodgers, he said, the tree that grows in Brooklyn is an apple tree, and one of its products is stuck in the throat of the Brooklyn Dodgers. Which is his way of saying they choked, and they did. So little things like that. You had Elder Chester and great fans. We had in the Polo Grounds a guy named Louis Capel, Koppel, kind of a little fat guy, sat there in the bleachers, off slightly to the right, further into the left field side. As a result, I'm sitting in the bleachers and the volume's out there, and he was sitting out here. And he was there when Joe Adcock hit his home run into the center field bleachers of the Polo Grounds. It landed in Louis Capel's lap. Then it rolled to the floor below, between his feet, and he said to me, I was so fat I couldn't pick it up. and some kid ran over and he said, that kid has my baseball. Anyway, Louis liked to think that he inspired Bobby Thompson. He spoke kind of Buddhist language to him to tell him to have faith and relax and do this and do that. And then Bobby Thompson hit that home run, which may have been because the Giants may have had a camera in the clubhouse telling him when there was a fastball coming up and when it wasn't. Anyway, it's been a great and fun-filled life, and I admire that all of you continue that going. I wish I saw better. I wish I could see the games instead of having to take a chair and move it closer to the 48-foot screen we have. But I still call balls and strikes, and I know when I'm right and the umpires are wrong. I've been on the road recently with John's film about me, which is titled correctly Hano, a Center in the Bleachers, even though when my paragraph about me appeared in the vote for this thing, the person who wrote it said Hano, a life in the bleachers, which is not correct. It was Hano, a center in the bleachers. But then somebody today called me author from here. Wow. So anyway, I've been on the road, and at the very first screening of Hano, he said in the bleachers, I made some disparaging remarks about the quality of last year's work, the year before that World Series, the Kansas City A's and the Mets, the Kansas City Royals and the Mets. and how the first baseman seems to be content in trying to see who could give the game back to the other team. And but I said, that's a pity. That was not a particularly well-played game. And somebody in the seats during the question period, I think he took umbrage. And he said, because I had been talking about Babe Ruth, he said, do you think Ruth could hit 340 today? So I thought, I should have said, didn't say, well, he would have been 130 years old. maybe 311. But I didn't say that. It could be snappy comebacks. Don't come so snappily when you're 94 years old. Anyway, but I do think back at that moment, and I think that Babe Ruth in his prime would have hit the 340, but I thought he adapted so well. He was beautiful. People see him today and think of him only as that fat slob. And even some ball players thought that way. I sat at a bar in Scottsdale next to Carl Hubble 30 years ago or so. And we were talking about different things, and we talked about Ruth and how he really, at the end of the career, he looked pretty sharp. And Hubble said, yes, in 1935, when he was playing with the Braves, the Giants had opened the series in Boston. And he said, I pitched, he said, and I saw this fat slob get up. You could smell the beer from plate to where I was. I thought, oh, poor old guy. I'll just throw him fastballs. I'm not going to throw him a screwball. And I hear stories like that, so I said, how far did he hit it? and he said he hit it to Tulsa. to the Hubble's, background. Anyway, it's lovely when people do things like that, and it's made my life a pleasure. I don't particularly care about dying, but I certainly would much prefer the opposite. And so I thank you again. I thank you for your attention. I thank you for your laughter. You laughed at all the right places. And I hope you drive carefully. Thanks so much.